Hi, welcome back to this channel. We are talking today about how trauma impacts the soul. This is the third part in the series, and so far we have discussed what the differences between trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder. I've defined these, also giving you some indicators and examples of what people experience when they go through both trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. A little bit of a recap: trauma is an event or disturbance that affects someone's emotional state and stability, whereas post-traumatic stress disorder is actually a bit longer term. So trauma is short-term lived. Post-traumatic stress disorder develops when trauma has been an ongoing or consistent event and that's causing someone distress, and it can result in mental conditions like anxiety, stress, depression, and it can also impact someone's ability to do things on a day-to-day basis. So we discussed that in part 1. In part 2, and then went on to discuss some areas as to how trauma, started to talk about how trauma can affect the soul. So we know that the soul is the component of the mind, will, and the emotions. So in that part 2, we discussed how trauma can affect your mind. Now, in this part today, we are going to talk about how trauma impacts your emotions. I want to talk about, the impact of trauma on the emotional responses. I want to talk about how there's some signs that trauma is impacting your emotions. Some of you are already probably thinking, my emotions, it could be that I'm feeling sad all the time, depressed. We're going to get onto that. And then I want to give you some ways to overcome trauma and your emotions and to basically reclaim your life back, because you were not created to be living in traumatized situations or circumstances. So let's start off with some definitions. I've got my notes down here. A lot of all the materials are linked in the blog in the comment section. So if you are interested, you can go on to the blog where I have everything a bit more detail for you. So how does trauma impact emotional responses? Trauma affects the ability to regulate emotions. It often results in emotional numbness, chronic anxiety, irritability, or angry outbursts. Now, in the brain, the way it's been created is that we have a central regulatory center that helps us to process our emotions. When someone finds themselves in a traumatic event, so traumatic event could be, finding yourself in a situation where there's a natural disaster like earthquake or flooding, you're starting to feel afraid, you're starting to feel, confused. You might even feel a little bit irritable or angry, hopeless. The part of the brain that processes all those emotions and feelings is called the amygdala. Now, it's located in the sort of rear part of the brain, and it helps us to process those emotions so that we are processing it in the sense that it's helping us to then assess whether we are really in real danger or not. The amygdala becomes overactive in cases where people find themselves in persistent trauma, so where that trauma is an ongoing thing or event in their life. For example, if someone finds themselves in a chronic state of abuse, where they are in a toxic relationship, where there's all forms and sorts of abuse, or someone that's found themselves in a road accident or an accident that's sort of causing them to refrain in their minds, it becomes overactive. So that part of the brain becomes overactive, making individuals easily triggered by reminders of past pain. Now, a survey by Mind, which is a charitable organization that deals with mental health in the UK, found that over 50% of adults who experience childhood trauma, they report ongoing struggles with anxiety and emotional dysregulation in their adult life. 50%. That's a huge number. I'm just going to take a pause there so that it soaks in. Over 50%. And these are the adults that have come to say, okay, look, I think I experienced this growing up. This is the trauma that I experienced. Over 50% of them. This does not account for adults that have not been accounted for in the populace. So it could be more than 50%. It could be 67%. We don't know. Over 50% of adults who experience childhood trauma, they report ongoing struggles with anxiety and emotional dysregulation in their adult life. Now, I want us to go back to scriptures because this really is the basis for this channel. It's revealing the heart of God for relationships by honing in on scripture, on what the Bible teaches us about the things that we experience in our day-to-day living, especially for people that went through or are going through or have come out of toxic relationship dynamics, abusive relationship dynamics, just the no-no-nos of relationships. Psalm 147 verse 3 says, He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wound. Isn't that something lovely to always remember? That God always heals the brokenhearted and binds up our wounds. He is there in the pain. You know, He acknowledges that we wound and we are hurting, and he offers healing. But the problem is many Christians actually struggle to accept and process emotions, believing faith should silence them rather than guide them towards healing. Some signs that trauma affects your emotions include feeling emotionally numb or disconnected. This is where someone shuts themselves out, like mentally, emotionally, from feeling any sense of joy, peace, or wanting to feel safety with someone, perhaps because they had been in a situation in the past where they'd given their trust to a loved one to feel safe and secure, but that person disappointed that trust, and as such, so that they don't feel that sense of disappointment, they must have made up in their mind to say, look, I'm not going to go through that anymore, so I'm going to shut myself out from anything that wants to resemble love, that wants to resemble safety, that wants to resemble peace, that wants to resemble joy. And it's, in a sense of the word, though it shouldn't be the case, but in the sense of the word, they've put themselves in a position where they have put themselves in a glass where they can't feel and they can't receive either. And I just feel, I feel really sad thinking that people have been through such horrible things that you can justify that it feels okay to make that decision, but inadvertently you're also robbing yourself of the opportunity to actually form genuine, new, and loving connections and relationships with people that really truly care about you. Another sign of how trauma affects someone's emotions is that they overact into minor issues. Overreacting in the case of an abusive and toxic relationship is when someone has been in that space for so long. They probably stayed because of commitments and other things that can be factored into why some people stay in some certain types of dysfunctional relationships. They become accustomed to, for example, hearing their spouse belittle them, or even emotionally abuse them, physically abuse them, psychologically abuse them. It only takes that much to get them to react, because they have, in a sense, been under so much oppression and subjection to that level of abuse that at some point they just snap and they choose to want to stand up for themselves. But the difference is, because they in a sense tolerated that level of atrocity for so long, the magnitude at which they will respond to something would not match the magnitude of what seemingly seems to be inconsequential. So for example, if someone finds themselves in toxic relationships that constantly belittles them, berates their character, their intelligence, and then they don't stand up for themselves, and they go to work and they've done this wonderful presentation, it's fantastic, and then they give them this presentation and maybe they just made one or two errors that someone pointed out in the audience. It might be that at that point they've actually had it so that they react to what seems to be inconsequential pointing out of an error, which is a fact, of their work. So, but because that person hadn't dealt with the underlying issues that had been going on in their private life, they then go out in public and they sort of act out on something that just seems to other people seems nothing. And that person could end up going to disciplinary and on all sorts. But, you know, the thing about the UK that I like is the work policies help employees. So there's something called employee assistance program, but if someone is going through something in their personal and private life, they can actually solicit the help of the employee assistance program, which is a combination of people that are counselors, therapists, people that work with people, to just make sure that they are in the best possible shape, mentally and psychologically as can be. But yeah, so that issue of someone overreacting to minor issues can actually could cost them their job, and it could be that, you know, it was not their intention to just lash out at that point, but because they've been suppressing that emotion of feeling berated, anger, the irritability, and it just came out all at once. A third sign that trauma is affecting someone's emotions is the difficulties expressing their feelings safely, because already in their sense of environment where they should feel safe, the most safe, they don't feel safe. So they often will find that they bottle up a lot of things because they feel like they can't share how they feel with other people. And it's not the case. If you just remember the stats that I read, over 50% of adults have said that, you know, what they went through in their childhood has had a negative and adverse effect on their you know, behaviors as an adult. So it is a lie to even believe that you're the only one going through what you're going through. And lastly, another indicator is constantly feeling fear, constantly feeling afraid, constantly feeling shame. Some practical indicators as well include feeling numb, you know, shutting down emotionally, having outbursts of anger and irritability, sudden crying spells without clear reasons, constant fear of anxiety, even in safe environments, and feeling shame and guilt that are persistent and not rational. Some ways to overcome these negative feelings of trauma in your emotions is to identify the thought, so being aware of the thought, having a journal, noticing what triggers those emotions and feelings to come out so that you're better prepared for when they do appear. Naming the emotion. So there's an emotions wheel I'm going to link down in this video. You can go and access it. It's such a good tool to use. And if you want to book a 15-minute consultation with me, no charge to you whatsoever, you can reach out to me as well. I'm going to put my details down below. I am a counselor and I help people come out of toxic relationships and heal to be the best version of themselves that God has created them to be. And in one of those sessions, I would also introduce you to the emotions wheel that can help you identify how you're feeling, and we'll do a bit more drill down on the emotions to define specifically what caused those emotions to originate inside of you. Because it's different when someone just says, I just feel sad, or I just feel bad. There must be reasons why you feel that way. And these are things that I talk through with my people and my clients that consult me on how they feel and what makes them feel a certain way. Renewing your mind is another powerful strategy to overcome feelings of negative thoughts and emotions, so that whenever a person feels sad and depressed, you just remind yourself that you are the righteousness of Christ. And through you, because you have the mind of Christ, there is no room for depression. And these are some things that I use in my personal life, where I would write down on my bathroom mirror things about me and promises that God has given me that helps me to combat negative emotions. Let's not forget, emotions are meant to be felt. Positive, negative, all sorts of emotions. But the danger that happens is when negative emotions take over our ability to sense any positivity or positive emotions out of a situation and scenario that's happening and taking place in our lives. The effect of post-traumatic stress disorder and trauma has no right to own your life, so that you're giving mental real estate to bad emotions or negative thinking and thought patterns. And these are some of the things that I would discuss as well in those sessions with you. So if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, like this video, share with everyone that you know will benefit from it, subscribe to my channel. And I would hope that you will join me in the next one, because in the next video, we're going to talk about how trauma impacts behavior. Yeah, how trauma impacts behavior. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to put your thoughts, your comments down below. If there's anything else that I've missed on how you think trauma impacts emotions, do share down below. I'm so looking forward to seeing your comments. And I'll see you in the next video, guys. Thank you. Bye.